Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We've got about 70 folks on the call, so thanks. Hi, everyone. My name's Kristina, and this is Theresa.
Hi.
We'll do a more in-depth intro first, but we want to start with some Zoom basics. And very first, we want to say a huge thank you to Sky's Story. She's a volunteer who set this whole event up. She's with our Seattle Climbing Committee. And she runs Beta and Brews, which is sponsored by the Seattle Climbing Committee. So if you haven't yet, we encourage you to go grab a beer. This is meant to be a fun, interactive evening. All right, so first things first, if you're new to Zoom, welcome to the year 2020. This is what everything looks like. So to manage the conversation today, we're gonna do a couple things. So first, we're going to pause throughout the presentation to make sure that we're answering any questions. I prefer, rather than following the chat, because it's hard to do when you're also talking, that folks instead raise your hand if you have a question. So we're all going to practice this right now. At the bottom of your Zoom screen here, click on Manage Participants. This is not very intuitive, but that's where you raise your hand. And then over here in the little hamburger guy, you click on Raise Hand. So let's see y'all do it. Nice, Travis, Galloway, very first, good job. Awesome, Nick, Ben, Gavin, excellent. This is, I mean, bravo. This is some hand holding, hand raising. I think you can also applaud if you want, which we take applause, we'll take that. Okay, go ahead and lower your hands. And moving throughout this presentation, I will be watching this. So if you have your hand raised, I'll go ahead and call on you, unmute yourself, and you can ask your question. So a couple other things related to this. We recommend, please, if you have your video on right now, please go ahead and turn that off so that we can all save a little bit of bandwidth. It's been lovely seeing some of you though. Also, if you're seeing a bunch of people on your screen in front of the screen and you don't want to, you can go ahead and minimize, use the minimize option so you only see whoever's talking, and then that way you can see more of the screen. The presenter view is kind of the one that you want there. Okay, so first, also just a couple of notes about the Mountaineers. Founded in 1906 by 151 visionaries. 77 of the first founders were women, so over half were women at the time. Today, we're still a 501c3 nonprofit, and our mission is to provide outdoor education and conservation opportunities to people throughout the Pacific Northwest and beyond. We have 14,000 members, including more than 3,000 volunteers like Sky, who make our activities happen. As I mentioned earlier, this is Beta and Brews. Cheers. And we're here just to share Beta about things that we love. In this case, it's turned us all year. And just a quick ask that things are really tough for the Mountaineers right now. They're tough for a lot of people and nonprofits. But if you feel so inclined after this presentation, we'd love it if you could make a small donation to the Mountaineers. Even $5 makes a huge difference and enables us to continue offering events like this moving forward. And Sky will send out a follow-up email that includes a link to where to donate, along with the recording of this presentation, etc. Nice note from Catherine that if you're on an iPad, yeah, it's in participants to raise your hand. So that's the same for everyone. You have to click on participants to raise your hand. Thanks for that call out. So, first things first, what is Turns All Year? We like to define Turns All Year as the ridiculous pursuit wherein participants try to ski at least once a month for as many months in a row as possible. So the rules are different for different people. What constitutes as a day of skiing is completely up to you. And it means something different to nearly everyone who does Turns All Year, which we also refer to as TAY, and we'll talk about TAY throughout this presentation. So my rules are that I have to have skis on my feet on snow for an hour. So whether or not I spent the entire day skinning and I didn't ski at all, that still counts as a day of skiing for me. So skinning, backcountry skiing, and riding chairlifts all count.
So for me, I have to ski 500 vertical feet of turns. And I think I came up with that number because it's twice the height of the ski hill I grew up on in Wisconsin. And it can either be backcountry or lift access, doesn't matter, at least 500 vertical feet of turns.
Mm-hmm. The one consistent thing that we have heard is that it needs to be turns. So it can't be one turn on snow, it has to be two.
Multiple, yeah. So a little bit more about myself. As I mentioned before, I grew up in Wisconsin, and my parents put me on skis when I was 2 years old. My mom is a ski patroller in Wisconsin. She still is. She's been on patrol for over 40 plus years, and she's listening in tonight, so hi, Mom. And so she would ski patrol every Saturday and take us to the hill and put us in lessons while she patrolled. So I learned to ski from a very young age. And then went on to do some ski racing in Wisconsin and in Michigan in college. And then I went on to PT school, and for my clinicals in PT school, I ended up in Portland for one of them. And that was my first introduction to the volcanoes here in Washington. I got to ski on Mount Hood in June, and it was absolutely fantastic, and I kind of fell in love with the Pacific Northwest. So I ended up moving to Seattle after I graduated PT school in July of 2010. And when I moved out here, I had the goal of skiing in every month of the year, but not necessarily consecutively. I didn't know that was really possible. And one of the first people I met out here, I was talking to about this goal, and they're like, well, you know, you can do that here in Washington. You can ski all year round. So that's kind of when my turns started. It was November of 2010 is when I started turns all year. So I'm currently at 114 months.
And I am currently mad at Theresa because I am exactly a year behind her. So I'm at 102 months, and I don't wish her any injury, but I will pretty much never catch up, and I am not at all bitter about that. But like Theresa, I'm very privileged in that my parents started me skiing when I was young, and my mom's also on the call. Hi, Mom. So I grew up skiing in Montana, always really loved that. Moved out to Washington State to go to UW and started snowboarding kind of as a teenage rebellion, and did that while I lived here, and then got back into skiing pretty much full time. And I was introduced to backcountry skiing by a friend that I met through the Mountaineers. And then I just was like, yeah, this is my new thing. This is what I'm going to do. I love skiing. And now I can do it all the time. So that's a little bit about me. Oh, and I also, as my day job, I work as the membership and communications director at the Mountaineers. So this event is very near and dear to my heart. This photo you see right here is from 2014, Theresa? Yeah. 2014 on Mount Hood. So we had both gone up to do a climb of Mount Hood, and we were invited by a mutual friend. And so our very first meeting was at 9,000 feet on Mount Hood. We camped out, and then the next day summited and skied down together. And I just remember thinking, I like this gal. I really love her style of skiing, which you get to see in a bunch of these photos. And our ski relationship was pretty much born from there. We have, I keep a spreadsheet, which I'll talk about later, about all my skis, and we have spent like 120 days skiing together in the last 6 years, and I hope that we get many, many more in the future.
Yeah.
Okay, so the tutus, just gonna spend a quick minute on why we ski in tutus, because you'll see those everywhere too. If you haven't read about the Mother's Day tradition on Mount St. Helens, started by the late, great Kathy Phibbs, every year for Mother's Day, people dress up in dresses and go and climb Mount St. Helens in honor of the moms. And a few years ago, my friend Johnny introduced me to the idea of the tutu as the ultimate backcountry technology, which is very true. It's way more comfortable than a dress. It doesn't cause chafing. You can wear it and not even notice it. It also has multiple uses, like as a pillow or as a sling. It also keeps your bottom warm. So there's a lot of really great benefits to the tutu. I've written blogs about it if you're interested. But so after doing Mount St. Helens, I decided I wanted to wear the tutu when we attempted the Emmons Glacier on Mount Rainier. And on our way back down from the summit, we ran into this woman who said, "Why are you wearing a tutu?" And I lied to her and I said, "Because it's my birthday," which it was not. And she said, "Oh my gosh, my 11th essential is a happy birthday banner." And she pulled this banner out of her backpack, which was crazy, and we took a photo with it. And so I have continued to wear the tutu. I make all my friends wear tutus because it's an instant backcountry icebreaker, and it allows you to have experiences like this and conversations that you would not have otherwise. So we really love it. I would also like to point out Tony, who said that the tutu is for safety, which is a very important thing too, because on this particular trip, we had friends who didn't go to the summit. They stayed at the camp and they were able to say, "Hey, have you seen the girl in the pink tutu? Did she make the summit?" And so people always know where I am, and I'm not someone who should be left unsupervised. So once you start backcountry skiing, and we've sort of geared this presentation for people who have backcountry skied a little bit, but are maybe new to trying to finish the turns all year thing, you need to be prepared to hear the following. Are you going skiing?
Where are you going? There's no snow.
I used to cross-country ski.
Who's paying you to do this?
You do realize they have ski lifts and gondolas for skiing and snowboarding, right?
Is that your training weight?
Hey, is there a rental shop up there?
Do you get a fine for making marks in the snow like that?
Can I pose with your skis?
Oh, I can't see that.
And this is the most extreme thing I have ever seen. So I did a poll of Turns All Year participants. These are some of the better answers, but you will definitely need to be prepared to hear some crazy things when you're up there.
So just a little overview of what we're going to go over tonight. So we've kind of organized this by month, and we have a couple of our go-to places that we're going to go over for every month. All of the places we picked require minimal glacier trips people are new to take, and most of them are possible as day trips. A lot of them you can do as an overnight trip if you want to, but they're pretty easily done in a day. And all of this information tonight is assuming that public lands are going to reopen, but definitely check for closures before you go, and make sure you stay within the guidelines that are out there. We've also kind of assumed that you have backcountry skiing experience and that you're a competent skier on black diamond terrain, and off-piste skiing. So the first thing, I think you have to do the next slide, Kristina. There we go. So first thing I'd like to talk about is weather a little bit. So this is kind of my go-to when I'm looking at weather in the summer. Definitely not an expert on weather at all, but this is what I found that's worked for me. So there's 3 different websites that I usually look at when I'm looking at weather, and I kind of compare the forecast between all 3 of them, and then decide if it's a go for the day or not, based on those forecasts. Sometimes it's iffy, you just got to go anyway and see how it works out. So this is the NOAA website, which is really great for pretty detailed weather. If you search for Mount Rainier, all of these are going to be Mount Rainier forecasts that I pulled up earlier this week. So if you search for Mount Rainier NOAA and click on the link, this is what pops up. So they have kind of summary of the forecasts in the top and then a little detailed forecast underneath that. And then if you scroll down a little bit further on the page, you'll get down to this map here. And what I like about the map is, especially on Rainier, you can choose the part of Rainier you're going to. So if you're going to Camp Muir, you can kind of click on the south side and get near the elevation you're going to be at. Or if you're going over to the inner glacier, you can click on the north side, and sometimes the forecast will vary a little bit between the two sides, so that's kind of nice. The elevation for the forecast is listed down here, and that'll change where you click on the map. And then another thing that I really like is the forecast weather table interface, this link here. So if we go to the next slide there, when you click on that link, this is what pops up. It's a nice table format. What I really like about this is shows the chance of precipitation and how much precipitation is expected. And then I also like to look at the freezing level on here and how that's going to change during the day. I'll get into that a little bit more later. And then also the cloud cover is nice to look at, see just what, if there's going to be sun for the day or if it's going to clear up as the day goes on. And again, that's specific to that forecast or that elevation. The next one is mountain forecast. So what I like about mountain forecast is that you can look at the forecast for all different elevations. So there's been, this I found to be probably the least accurate of all the websites that I look at, but what I really like about it is the simply being able to look at the different elevations. So as you can see for Friday, at lower elevation, there's going to be some clouds, but at higher elevation on Rainier, it's all sun. So sometimes you can figure out where the cloud deck is going to be based on just clicking on the different elevations. So sometimes when it's rainy and stormy in Seattle, you'll be able to get above and get into some sun on Rainier, which is nice. So that's mostly what I use mountain forecast for. And then the next one is spotwx.com. So when you go to spotwx.com, you can just search for your destination. So if you click in Mount Rainier, a bunch of different, this table will show up. There's a bunch of different forecasts. I usually go to the Canadian 10-day forecast. The only reason is because the person that told me about this website, that's kind of their go-to. So that's really the only reason I use that one. Sometimes I'll look at the other ones too, but this Canadian 10-day forecast seems to be the most accurate. So when you click on that, this page will pop up and there's a bunch of different tables that come up. I really only use the first three on there. There's more information that I cut out on the bottom that if you're really into weather, you can look at it. But it's nice to see what the temperature fluctuation is going to be. From this, you can tell if it's going to freeze overnight, which is nice. And then you can also look at precipitation throughout the day. And then I really like this graphic down here, which shows the cloud cover. So you can kind of see what the cloud cover is going to do throughout the day, which is really nice. And then at the very bottom, just kind of shows how windy it's going to be. So other things to consider when you're choosing a destination to go is aspect. So in general, I like to go to south-facing aspects in June. So June we have, there's quite a few places that are easily accessible still here in June. So it's nice to hit those south-facing aspects where, you know, sun cups aren't too much of a problem usually yet in June. And we're still getting those melt freeze cycles. So south faces stay pretty good through June. But then by July and August, south faces are getting pretty sun-cupped and really affected. So sometimes the north-facing aspects stay a little better into July and August. And then you also want to consider the time of day that you're going to ski. So that can sometimes depend on what the freezing level is going to be for the day and what elevation you're going to be at. So in general, I try and go to a place where the freezing level is going to be within 1,000 feet of that, because you want to make sure that the snow is going to soften up. And then you can also look at when throughout the day that freezing level is going to occur based on some of those tables that I showed you earlier. And you can kind of choose your time of day you're going to ski based on how quickly the freezing level is going to spike throughout the day. And then you also want to consider avalanche danger. So in June, there's definitely still a potential for wet slides. So you want to be well aware of that. That potential definitely decreases into July and August, but you want to always keep in the back of your mind that avalanches are always possible. And we do get some snow at, especially up on Rainier, even in July and August. So it's just something to always keep in mind.
Yeah, and to add to avalanche danger, this is something that everybody develops their own comfort level with. So some tayers always carry a beacon shovel probe regardless of where they're going or what they're doing. Anytime you're doing an overnight, you probably want to do that. At the very least, you want to make sure that you have a shovel. And then depending on your destination and where you're going, sometimes you might bring it and then just decide to leave it in the car. But that's something that you always want to have with you in the car. And then once you get to the destination, you can talk with your partners about who's comfortable with what, and always default to the most safety conscious person in the group.
Yeah, definitely. And then a few other things to consider, snow conditions. So Tay is a really good resource for that. And thanks a lot to Pavel for the new Tay website that's up and running now. So it makes it a lot easier to post trip reports than the old version of the site. So that's a great place to check for if anybody else has been where you're thinking of going and see what the conditions have been like. And then as roads start to open up in the spring, especially in June, it's good to check the status of those roads. So a lot of times that's on the National Forest website or the National Park website, depending on where you're going. A lot of times I'll just figure out what the name of the road is and Google that road status, and you'll be able to find it pretty easily.
Great, so now we're gonna dive in to the locations, and I don't see any hands up, but feel free to throw them up if you have any questions. And I would also like to say that this presentation is also a drinking game. So anytime you see a beer on the screen, we welcome you to take a sip. Okay, so first, we're gonna dive into the Southwest Chutes. They're on Pato, also known as Mount Adams. This is a big one-day trip. It's a very comfortable 2-day trip. I really recommend driving down, camping in the parking lot, summiting in one day, coming back, camping in the parking lot, and driving home. It's 12 miles, 6,700 total feet of elevation gain, and then the summit's at 12,300 almost. So you're definitely like feeling winded towards the end just from the elevation gain. You start at Cold Springs Campground and you follow the South Spur route. Be sure to bring poop bags with you because there's very limited facilities and you definitely need to pack it out. You need a Northwest Forest Pass to park in the campground, and then depending on time of year and which day you're going, you get a $10 to $15 climbing permit that can be bought online. For this gear-wise, you want to bring your regular touring setup. I would bring ski and boot crampons, and then you definitely want a whippet and or an ice axe. I generally carry both. And then your ideal weather report is freezing level above 10,000. It's really nice if there's low wind. Pretty much we always look for low wind whenever you're going above 10K because it makes the snow conditions really miserable if it's windy, and it's no fun to get blown off the top of the mountain. And really high or no clouds because you want the snow to freeze, and it's really easy to get lost in whiteout conditions here. So this is the route that you follow. The campground is down at about 4,400 feet. You snake your way up through, this is all old burn forest now. Timberline's around 6,700 feet, and then you slowly make your way up this saddle here to this area, which is called Lunch Counter. So if you're camping overnight, this is where you would stay at Lunch Counter. Then in the morning, or if you're doing it in a day, you just continue on and you go another 2,300 feet up to the top of Piker's Peak. This, as you're approaching it, is a false summit, so it looks like you're there. You're not, I'm sorry. You lose about another 300 feet of elevation gain in this saddle, and then you work your way up to the summit. You've got about another 1,000 feet to get to the true summit. So this is just, we'll run through these real quick, but these are just some pictures. So this is the south climb, again, trail number 183. This is the old burn forest that you follow. It's really beautiful in there, and you can see the summit of Pato the entire time. So this is actually the true summit back right up here, and then this here is Piker's Peak, the false summit. Oops. The skinning, once you get above tree line, is relatively straightforward. It's not too steep, but especially if you're going really early in the morning, you will probably want ski crampons. Sometimes it looks like she's on her stilettos here, but generally you can just stay on your first riser on the way up. And then you can see there's stunning views. This is Mount St. Helens behind. So this is kind of working your way up. It just gives you a sense of the snow. Generally there's snow that goes below tree line. So you just follow this nice big shoulder all the way up here. And then this is lunch counter right here. So you work your way up and then you begin going up towards Piker's Peak. You can expect a couple of carries on the way. You have to cross a few ridge lines. You can see we have a hiker coming down and then across. And then this is a sunset view taken from lunch counter. So it's a really beautiful place to camp. You can definitely find snow to melt to make water. Sometimes there is also running water under and through some of these rock outcroppings. There's also folks who built shelters here from old rock walls to protect you from the wind. So it's a really great place to camp if you have the time. Definitely do that. And then in the morning, this is what you're going to go after. This is the Piker's Peak approach right here. So we did it in a long one day. We had camped in the parking lot and left about 4 to make our way up here. So again, this is lunch counter in a different year, making our way towards the summit. Someone just asked what year, month were these photos from. So these photos are all from June and they're from different years. So this is Theresa making her way up Piker's Peak. Actually, that might be Frankie making his way.
I think that's Frankie, yeah.
Yeah. So you can skin it or you can boot it. This is another year booting up my friend Ryan. It really just depends on your own personal comfort level and just also snow conditions. A lot of times when the skinning is steep or it's particularly icy, I find it's way faster to just put your skis on your back and boot your way up. But for this specific trip, it was pretty icy near the top, which is why I recommend that you also bring boot crampons in addition to ski crampons. So here's a look once you top out of Piker's Peak and then you lose this 300 feet of elevation gain, and then you make your way up to the true summit, which is right here. And fun fact, there's actually a cabin up there, but most years it's completely, or at least all the time that I've been there, it's completely under the snow. So this photo I think is from like 2013 or 2014. And then this photo is just from I think 2015 or 2016. So same time of year, but you can see that depending on how the snow has been that year, it's very different up there. So this is Theresa standing on top of the cabin, which I promise is there, but you just can't see it. So then after you enjoy the beautiful views, you can see Y East right here. You go ahead and make your way down. Skiing down from the summit can be super fun. This day it definitely was really fun. And then what you want to do is you ski down to here, and then you want to dive into the southwest chutes, which are right here. So rather than traversing back up to the top of Piker's Peak and skiing back down the way you came, which is also an excellent ski, you can totally do that if you want. So if you're worried about route finding, I would go that way. But we're talking about the southwest chutes today, which is about 2,500 to 3,000 feet of like just really excellent 45-degree perfect corn skiing if you can really nail it. So then you take the turn and you make your way down the southwest chute. So again, this is looking down from the summit. These people are traversing to Piker's Peak, but you instead go right. And then this is looking at it from the bottom. So you make your way down these chutes here. You want to watch for loose rocks and wet slides. Most slides are done by this time of year, but it's something you always want to be on the watch out for. And then here's this saddle right here. And the most important thing about skiing the southwest chutes is making sure that you catch this saddle and hightail it back out over to the main climbing route. A lot of people go too far down and then it's just a complete monster disaster to get back to the main route. I did that my very first time I climbed it. I really don't recommend all of the bushwhacking that it requires. You will need to be prepared again to do some carries, or in my case, all skis are rock skis, so just go for it. So again, here's just another look, because I can't reiterate this enough. So you come down here, and this is actually a summer trail that you want to follow around all the way back over to the main trail. But if you keep going and you get too far down, it's really hard to get back over. So these maps are all online, and this will be up after the presentation. But that is the Southwest Chutes. And as you can tell from Frankie's face, it is a super duper fun ski.
Yeah, it sure is. One of probably my favorite place to go actually in June is the Interglacier on Tahoma, or Mount Rainier. Probably my favorite because I feel like it's the most consistent good snow I've ever found in June. So it's about 12 miles round trip if you go all the way up to the Steamboat Prow. You gain 5,200 vertical feet and top out at 9,700 feet, which is the Steamboat Prow. The start is at the White River Campground. So the road to the White River Campground and usually opens when 410 opens, which is usually mid to late May. And then the campground itself usually opens sometime in June. So we've even done this trip where we'll go ski the Interglacier and then stay in camp that night. It's kind of nice to not have to drive home and just hang out and have a fire afterwards. And so that's always a good option, but you definitely don't have to spend the night. You need a National Parks Pass for access, and then terrain setup and ski crampons are usually worth it to bring, and then a whippet or an ice axe is nice to have as well. The route is pretty mellow itself. There's just one steep section that the ski crampons might come in handy. And then definitely bring approach shoes, because by the time the road melts out and they get it cleared, it's usually, you can expect to carry about 2.5 miles up to Glacier Basin. Sometimes it's less than that. Again, when Kristina mentioned before, a lot of times I like to leave my skis on and carry them as far as I can instead of transitioning too early and then having to carry later. So usually go all the way up to Glacier Basin before transitioning to skinning. So, yeah, there we go. So this is a overview map. It's a pretty straightforward route. You start at the White River Campground and then go up to Glacier Basin. Again, that's usually where we transition. And then from there, you're kind of just following the valley up. The Interglacier itself is pretty much in its own valley, so it's really hard to go the wrong place when you're up there. But if you go, there we go. So the trail up to Glacier Basin is really nice. It's nicely graded. You gain, I think, 1,700 vert over the 2.5 miles, and then it's a pretty easy walk to get up there. And there's only one place where you can kind of go wrong. So as you're getting close to the Glacier Basin camp, the summer trail kind of does this big turn to the right. You'll probably see some ski tracks also going off to the left though, that cross over the river that's coming down. In some years, there's definitely enough snow that you can go that way to the left and be fine crossing the river. But a lot of the years, by the time everything's open, the river's open too much, so it's not a good idea to go that way. Usually I'd recommend just sticking to the summer route and making sure you hit that hard right turn, which this picture is Kristina actually coming down that way, but that's kind of what it looks like in real life there. And then, so when you get to Glacier Basin Camp, there is, if you do want to camp there, some groups will camp on the way up to do the Emmons route, because this is the start of the Emmons route on Mount Rainier. If you do want to camp at Glacier Basin, you do need a backcountry permit, so just be aware of that. But once you get up into the basin, you'll kind of see, this is last summer in June of 2019. And Kristina just pointed out the route there, and you can see the footprints. Pretty easy to cross up onto the riverbed, and then the glacier is up around the corner there. In other years though, like in 2018, you can see a huge difference. This is a little bit later in June in 2018, but I think maybe it's 2 weeks later. So not a huge difference, but you can see definitely a lot less snow. And this year, the river was open. You can't quite see it, but the river was open there. So we decided to stick to, there's this big glacial moraine that you'll see in the next picture. And we decided to climb up that to get to snow. So this is 2015, after we had that horrible snow year. And this was actually very early June in 2015, and it was already that melted out. And so this is a really good picture of the glacial moraine that you can climb up if there isn't snow. It's a lot easier than trying to navigate the river. So yeah, you just climb up the glacial moraine, and then even in very low snow years, you can definitely transition to skiing at the top of that glacial moraine. But in a normal snow year, you can usually transition that right when you get into Glacier Basin as it opens up.
Yeah, and just to help orient people, so sunrise is actually just right up over here.
Yeah.
And when people are approaching to do the Liberty Ridge climb, they also approach this way, and then they come up through this saddle here and then dive over to the other side to get over to Liberty Ridge.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is in 2018 at the top of that glacial moraine where we were transitioning to start skinning. And then you can see the glacier here, and you just come across, this is the one steep section that I was talking about, where if it's early enough in the morning and it's still frozen, it can be a little heinous. So that's where the ski crampons might come in handy. And also if it's too late in the day, it can get pretty mushy and be tough to skin too. So you kind of want to hit that just right. But that's really the only steep part on the route.
Theresa, can you talk a little bit? Liam has a question about crevasse danger on this glacier.
Yeah, and actually I'll get to that. So the glacier doesn't actually start until about right up below these rocks. So it comes down to there. It's definitely very safe this early in June. I've only seen cracks opening up in June that really, really bad snow year. So there's a route that's I'll talk about that you want to take. I've been up there probably 20 times and never seen crevasses up there. Later in the summer though, definitely in July, it does start to open up. So that's why I recommend this definitely for June. And like I said, it's pretty safe. So you definitely want to be aware of it. But I've never really seen an issue up there with crevasse danger. So this is coming up that steep part that I was pointing to before, where the skinning can get a little bit tricky if you don't hit it just right. And then coming out of that steep section, you can see the glacier moraine back there where we walked up. And then after you get past that steep part, it's pretty easy skinning past there. And nice easy cruise up to the steamboat prow. So this is where it starts to flatten out, and you're going to keep heading straight up the valley to there. If you keep going straight, you're going to end up at Camp Curtis, and that is where you drop over onto the Emmons part of the glacier. So that's a little bit below where this picture is, and you'll see most of the time by that time of the year, you'll see tracks going to Camp Curtis. And then if you hang to the right a little bit and stick up the ridge line, to the left, over here. So if you hang over here on the ridge line, that's a really safe place to be. Like I said, I've never seen crevasses over there. Over here on the right side of the glacier though, Looker's Right, that's where the crevasses start to open up a little bit later in the summer. And then as you get up to the Steamboat Prow, this is the view from Steamboat Prow. It's absolutely gorgeous up there. It's one of my favorite spots in the park. You get a really good view of the Emmons Glacier and the Winthrop right next to it. And then comes the fun part, skiing. So also really good views of Little T there. and the Emmons Glacier behind it, or in front of it, I should say. So if you hit it right, the skiing's really good on the way down. Some of the best corn I've skied has definitely been on the Inner Glacier in June.
This skiing is a bit of a misnomer because it looks like it's sort of icy, but these were some of the best conditions we've ever had. It was like just at that freezing point of slayable corn.
Yeah, it was right when the corn or the snow was melting and turning into corn.
Which we call
like, oh, I was just gonna say, it was one of those times it kind of sounded like glass as you were skiing through it, as the top of the snow crystals were just breaking up a little bit.
Yep, definitely corn o'clock.
Yeah. Nice. And then one thing to be aware of when you're coming back down, so this was a trip with our friends Nikki and Corey and my twin sister Trisha. So this was the 2018 when we hiked up the moraine, transitioned at the top of the moraine, but then when we were coming back down, we decided to ski down a little bit further because we didn't want to walk back down the moraine again. So when we transitioned at the bottom, we were on the wrong side of the river. So we needed to get back to the other side of the river to catch the trail again. So Corey makes this look really easy in this photo because he's very tall. I am very short. And this crossing looked pretty scary to me and my twin sister Trisha. And I don't know, we didn't want to get our feet wet or slip into the river. So her and I decided it would be a good idea to go find a log and build a bridge. So we made our own bridge to get over to the other side of the river. But this whole ordeal probably took, I don't know, what was it, like half hour, 40 minutes?
Yeah, a while. It's
something ridiculous like that. So just be aware, you might get stuck on the wrong side of the river if you go down a different way than you came up.
Yeah, and this is just a classic example of like people being comfortable with different levels of risk. So I'm actually like 3 inches shorter than Theresa, and I made the leap of faith over there that she and Trisha weren't comfortable making, and they found something that totally worked for them, which was excellent.
Yeah.
But there's actually a guy there with a telephoto lens just sort of hanging out on the moraine, and he took all these pictures and sent them to us. Because if you can imagine a calamity of errors, at one point both Trisha and Theresa had their backpacks on with their skis, both trying to bend over to pick up this log, and it was if you've never watched twins do anything together before, it was like classic.
Yeah. That was funny. So that's kind of an anomaly. Most years in June, you can ski pretty far back down on the trail up to Glacier Basin. And, you know, it's just a matter of how long you're willing to keep your skis on. Like Kristina said, you know, doing turns all year, all skis become rock skis. So there's a lot of times where you're just walking across bridges with your skis on, or occasionally some rocks. Sometimes we make it a competition to see who can keep their skis on the longest and get the most vert. So
sometimes she means always do that. Tony has a question about our ski width. So I have 2 primary backcountry skis. I just got these orange ones, so I haven't skied them a bunch, but the rainbow ones behind me are 104 underfoot, and then I also have some DPSC vets, my powder skis, and those are 102 or 112 underfoot.
Yeah, these are, what I'm on are the GPS Nina 99s, and I find those to be pretty good for all conditions. So that was my only backcountry setup for a really long time. I just recently got a newer setup that I use more for POW conditions now, but I was super happy on the 99s in all conditions.
Yeah, really anything from 98 to like 104 is going to be a really great all mountain, most condition ski.
Yeah.
So Theresa doesn't know, but I just slipped this slide in here. So we're done with our June overview, but a couple of years ago, Theresa decided she wanted to ski and climb 50K of vert in a month, all while having a full-time job. So if you need some other ideas, she did Inner Glacier, We did the Baker via the Squawk Glacier, which we decided not to talk about, but that's an excellent ski this time of year through the end of June. She climbed Mount Rainier. She went up to Camp Muir. We had a really terrible rainy escapade on Mix-Up Peak. Don't add that to your list. We climbed Mount Adams in a day. She did 2 laps on Inner Glacier, and then we also climbed Mount Hood. So if you're looking for other June ideas, or if you want to try to be as cool as Miss T-Town here, there's an idea for you.
I do have to make a disclaimer on that, though, that I work 4 10-hour days, so it was a little easier for me. I had some extra weekdays to add in there. So, but moving on to July.
Also, cheers.
Oh yeah, cheers. So in July, my favorite place to go is the Russell and the Flat Glaciers. So this is on the north side of Mount Rainier. And the Flat Glacier is unfortunately melting out pretty quickly, and there's absolutely no crevasse danger there. It's more of a snowfield at this point. The Russell Glacier, though, definitely is starting to melt out a little bit more and does have some pretty significant crevasses. So if you're going up there, you definitely want to take glacier gear. So we're mostly going to focus on the Flat, but we'll show you a little bit about the Russell too, because they're right next to each other. So if you're going up to the Flat, it's about 12 miles round trip, 2,600 vertical feet. The high point is at 7,500 feet, and that is at the base of the Flat head wall. So looking at this photo, the big head wall there is the Flat head wall. That's a pretty steep ski, but can be really fun. It's just as fun, though, to go to the base of the Flat here if you're not comfortable skiing that head wall, and you can still get a good, I think, 1,000 feet of turns from there. If you're going up to the Russell Glacier, it's about 16 miles, 4,700 vertical feet, and you get up to 9,600 feet, which is the high point on the Russell Glacier. So you start out at the Moich Lake Campground, which is, like I said, on the north side of Mount Rainier. National Parks Pass is required. If you're going to be camping, you want to get a backcountry permit. It is required for these areas. So the route goes up through Spray Park, and Spray Park has a limited number of backcountry users per night. So if that's full, you can go up to the Russell Glacier, and if you camp on the Russell or near the Russell Glacier, you're able to, it's unlimited camping up on the Russell Glacier, so they don't limit the number of people or number of groups that camp up on the Russell Glacier. And then for this trip, you want just the normal touring setup for the Flat. And then, like I mentioned before, you want to add your glacier kit in if you're going to go up to the Russell Glacier. So you start out carrying your skis. Usually it's about 4 miles up to Spray Park, all on dirt, and that's about 1,700 vert over those 4 miles. So if you're looking at the total mileage versus how much mileage you're carrying your skis, it is a lot. You're carrying your skis 8 miles total round trip, and you're really only skiing for 4 miles if you go to the base of the Flat head wall. But one of the reasons I think it's totally worth it is this part of the park is just absolutely beautiful. And once you're up on the snow and on the glacier, there's usually nobody up there. So it's a pretty cool experience. So this is a map of the route. So this is starting from the Wonderland Trail is here, which comes up to Spray Park. And then this is actually a GPS track of a trip I did last July. So this is where I cut off from the Wonderland Trail, and that's the most difficult part of this. You definitely want a clear day, because if you've never been up there before, the trail can be a little bit hard to find. It's just a little climber's trail that splits off the Wonderland Trail. It's not really a trail itself, but it's just this little tiny trail that cuts off from the Wonderland. So sometimes it can be hard to find. But you know it's the right one if you're looking up, and when you're looking up the Climbers Trail, it lines up pretty well with the Flat Glacier. So as you can see, it's a pretty straightforward getting up to the lake at the base of the glacier. And just to mention, this little pinpoint that I have there, I actually marked that because that's where I left my shoes that day. So I don't always carry my shoes with me when I go up if I'm going to be coming back down to the same spot. So I like to leave a pin of where my shoes are just in case I can't find them when I come back down, because that has happened. I've almost lost my shoes before. So just a little side note there. So this is a group of us that went up and camped in, I don't know, a few years ago, starting out at the Moich Lake campground. And then as you're climbing up, it's definitely well worth it to make the stop to see Spray Falls. So from over here, this is heading toward, coming from Moich Lake campground. And then these switchbacks are heading up towards Spray Park. And this is a really good spot, that junction there, to kind of drop your pack, take a little break before you climb up the switchbacks, and just go over. I think it's less than a quarter mile over to Spray Falls. And as you can see, it's absolutely beautiful. So definitely well worth it to make that little side trip. And then this is coming up into Spray Park. This is probably one of my favorite views in Mount Rainier. Just coming around the corner, you see this little bridge going over the creek, and Mount Rainier is just like right there in your face. It's a absolutely beautiful view. And then as you continue up, so this picture is taken from where I split off from the Wonderland Trail, looking up. As you can see, the route kind of curves up this way and cuts through the trees, and then eventually you end up at the base of this snowfield here. And then this is the flat glacier and the flat head wall, again, that you can see up there. So that's what it looks like in a good snow year. And then this is what it looks like when the snow has all melted out. So again, you just take that little climber's trail and go up. And usually, even in a bad snow year, you'll get up to this little lake where you can transition. So this is a picture of the lake, base of the flat there, off to the left. And then as you can see, like last year, I just went up to the base of the flat head wall because I was by myself and I wasn't going to go onto the Russell Glacier without a partner. So you can just ski the snowfield here. If you're going to continue up to the Russell Glacier, you're going to cut off over to the left here a little bit. So this is that little cutoff heading over toward the Russell Glacier. And that is where we decided to make camp on this trip. So if you go to the next slide, yeah, there we go. So this is Echo Rock that I think my friend Nick took this picture, and he's standing on Echo Rock. And then over there to the right is Observation Rock. And in between the two, there's this nice, pretty level snowfield that makes a really good spot for camping. And you can see our tiny little camp over there. So in the morning, we spent the night there. And then in the morning, we climbed up this little snow patch across the rocks over onto the Russell Glacier. And then, yep, made our way around and up onto this head wall here. So that's kind of the route. As you can see, this is coming on to the Russell Glacier. And then looking at the head wall that we skied there. As you get up higher on the Russell Glacier, there's a bunch of these little outcroppings. If you go to the next slide, Kristina. There's a bunch of these little outcroppings, and all of them make for really good viewpoints. So if you go over to the edge of the Russell Glacier, it drops off pretty drastically there, and then you get really good views of the Moich from there. So these are just some photos of the beautiful views up there. Really great spot to hang out and have lunch. And then this is just coming back down that head wall that I pointed out before. So it does get a little steep there. You can go back down the way we climbed up as well. It's a lot more mellow. But super fun turns, especially for July. I think this was actually early August when we did this trip. And as you can see, the snow is still pretty good. It's a little bit sun-cupped, but not bad at all. And then when you're coming back down, this again is a little bit better snow year. So you can see there's lake is still frozen, and you can kind of connect those patches of snow all the way back to the Wonderland Trail. It's kind of fun playing connect the dots. And then of course, when you get back to the parking lot, Moich Lake is a great spot to après after. Kind of just stick your feet in the water, cool off, have a beer, hang out. It's a great spot.
Yeah, and real quick, just on the, once you're over on the Russell Glacier, you can see here there's definitely crevasses. This particular group is all pretty comfortable on this type of terrain. What I like about most of the Pacific Northwest volcanoes is you can generally see where they are. You know, there's discoloration, there's dipping, you can already see the cracks. So we just, we're really conscientious in our selection of where we went. I think in this year we ended up crossing right about here and then made our way up and over.
Yeah, and I would say this picture is pretty old too. And in more recent years when I've been up there, I couldn't find a photo of it for some reason, but the crevasses have definitely gotten a lot bigger. And so at this point, I'm not comfortable going on the Russell Glacier anymore without a glacier kit because it's changed a lot over, this is probably
5 years.
6 years old. Yeah, 5 years, 6 years.
There's a bunch of questions about gear in the chat, which we're going to skip for now just in the interest of time. But if there's time in the Q&A, we'll chat about that. So my favorite place to go in July is on Culsha and Mount Baker at Artist Point. This is the laziest, easiest skiing you can do. It's what I like to call a car-assisted lap. They're about 650 feet per lap. You can do as many as you want. A downhill setup if you want. It's not a bad idea to have a whippet because it can be fairly steep, so just to help with the self-arrest in case you do fall. You definitely want it to be warm and sunny so you can ski in a tank top and shorts. And then for this particular one, you definitely want a carpool, and if you have a larger group, it's better, especially if you have someone who has like a truck, because you can take turns driving laps, and again, assuming it's COVID safe to do so. Yeah, so right behind me, this is the summit of Komakulshan, and then this is Artist Point up here, and then right behind me is the big parking lot for Artist Point. And there's a turnout to the right before you get to that big parking lot, and that's where we shuttle from. So it's easier than traversing all the way over on your skis. Just hop out right here. So here's a look at it. This is the ski area down here, and then the road makes its way up to the top. So here's the Artist Point parking lot. This is the pullout I'm talking about. So you pull out here, and it's hard to see because the map isn't great, but basically you get out right here, you ski traverse over to here, and then this is the chute that you want. So you ski this chute down, and then you traverse back across over to this parking lot trailhead here. You get in a car, you drive back up, you go down, you get in a car, you drive back up. So this is a rudimentary look here, but you can see these are the car laps. And then the first time we decided to try skiing in a different spot, I don't recommend that. Just go in the common route here. This particular day, I got about 1,800 feet, so that would be 4 or 5 laps. So here's a look at it from below. This is where we tried skiing the first time. I don't recommend it because not only are you further away and you have to traverse quite a bit longer to get back, but the skiing's just not as good. So this is the money chute right here. This is where you want to ski. It's where everybody skis. It's great corn. Sometimes you end up with these cool corn moguls. But you come out, you want to maintain your speed, and then you can take a high traverse or even a low traverse if you're a split boarder. You traverse all the way across, and you're able to traverse all the way back for the most part to the parking lot. You might have to do a little bit of shuffling at the end. Here's a look at that first shoot that I said not to do. As you can see, it's pretty spicy, and if Theresa were to fall, it's not great because you're right on top of those rocks. Always want to be cautious when there's snow over rocks because that could collapse, and there's always running water underneath. So just be careful when you're out there and look for signs of that. But this was taken in the main shoot, so you can see it's quite skied out. Really fun. Again, I'm in a tank top and shorts. It was just a gorgeous day, and it was great corn. So definitely do that. And then right next to the parking lot, there's this little lake, and so people do pond skimming. This guy was trying to do a flip and was unsuccessful. I don't have a photo of him landing in the water, but he definitely did a big old back flop. And it was quite cold, I would imagine. But yeah, there's some cool photos, and I've seen some people do some pretty cool tricks in here. So bring your bathing suit. So we're going to talk about August and September together because if you're smart, you can link those together and do them back to back, which Theresa will talk about. So I'm going to, yes, and cheers, Tony. Thanks for noticing. So I'm going to talk about the Paradise and the Paradise Glacier and the Muir Snowfield, which can both be accessed from the Paradise parking lot on Tahoma. So a couple things. This is the road that makes its way up. This is the Paradise parking lot. This is the route up the Muir Snowfield to Camp Muir. And this is the route that I typically take to get up to the Paradise Glacier. You stop about 9,400 feet, and then you make your way down the Paradise Glacier over here. So depending on where you go, whether you go up to ski the Muir Snowfield or you ski Paradise, I generally just take the Muir approach. You can go down, you can follow the road down to here to Fourth Crossing. You can hike up Fourth Crossing and kind of stay over towards the Paradise Glacier. A lot of people swear by that. They say it's easier, more straightforward. I believe them. I just haven't done it enough to be comfortable like explaining it. There's also quite a bit more objective hazard on that route, and there's less people should you find yourself in trouble. So I typically just follow this up, and then when I get over to the transition point below, is it Anvil Rock? Yeah. And below Anvil Rock, cross over to the Paradise Glacier and ski down. You can ski down quite far on the Paradise Glacier, but again, it gets really broken up, and you still, if you're taking the Fourth Crossing, you just follow that trail down. But I like to ski it until it gets bad, and then just hoof it back over to the Muir Snowfield and make it down. This, you just need standard backcountry gear. We typically don't carry anything else with us. Again, hazards, this is on the Paradise Glacier, so just always be super careful. Inevitably, every few years, someone will fall in a hole like this and drown, so be careful out there. And then the Paradise also has some cracks in it. So again, I just go to the Muir Snowfield and stay up high and away from all of this stuff. But if you do decide to go exploring, be sure that you have all the gear that you're going to need. Typically, you can expect to carry from the parking lot. Bring comfortable shoes. Be sure you have your tutu for safety. This is my least favorite part where it's still paved. It's so steep. You sweat so much. Make sure to take off layers before you get going. Be bold, start cold. This is our friend Nikki and I. This is, you know, a pretty typical look for August, September, October can all look like this, where it's really melted out and it's just a whole lot of dirt. So typically you're gonna have to carry up, this is just above Pebble Creek. Pebble Creek's down here. And what ends up happening is you get a lot of sort of very steep whoop-de-woos, which make it look like you can skin, but I never do. I always just carry as high up as I can go until I can really see consistent flat skidding. For me, it's just a lot easier and more efficient to wait a little bit longer to skin. On this particular trip, I went way higher in my boots than everybody else, but I waited for them, so I think it was a better choice. Again, this is kind of just looking up at Muir. you can, you see glaciers coming down. You just kind of follow the regular hiker's trail. It's well trodden. I try to stay out of the boot prints, but pretty straightforward. This is making the way up to Muir. If you've never been to Muir before, it's a really fun trip. It's great. Be prepared to see Muir for at least an hour before you get there. It really looks like you're close. I'm sorry, you're super duper not.
Yeah.
And then you finally get there and you're like right within, 300 feet, and you can see people and you're making eye contact, and then you inevitably like collapse because you're so tired. And yeah, Muir's great. Go check it out. This particular year, you can see sun cups were pretty bad. So if you don't know what a sun cup is, imagine taking a Volkswagen and turning it upside down and like stamping it in the snow and doing that over. So it's like a bunch of inverted bumps. It's pretty much the most miserable skiing you can imagine. If you could zoom in and see my face right here, you would see the face of someone who for the first time in their life wishes they were glissading instead of skiing. That's how bad it was. But other years it ends up like just being really creamy, smooth corns. You don't really know unless you go, or in my case, sometimes it's the only day you can ski, so it doesn't matter how conditions are. But most people will post on the Turns All Year forum or the Turns All Year Facebook group about how conditions are. And then these photos are on the, this is Anvil Rock here. So this is the upper part of the Paradise Glacier. And then this again is Anvil Rock right here. And then this is the Paradise Glacier. So as you're skiing down, you need to stay high right in order to stay on the snow line. Typically we'll ski this portion up here and then we'll kind of dive back over to the Muir snowfield. If you do stay on the Paradise, this is the sort of thing that you need to be in for. So there is one spot in particular where you have to hug very hard left because this is all completely broken up and you kind of want to snake your way through there. So I always recommend either getting GPS tracks from someone or going with someone who's been before and can sort of safely help you get down your first time.
All right, and then probably the easiest way to get August and September turns, or any summer turns really, is the Palmer Glacier on Wyist or Mount Hood. So if you're a person who likes to earn your turns for Turns All Year, it's about 2.5 miles to the top of the Palmer lift, and that tops out at 8,540 feet. So you gain 2,540 feet from the parking lot. If you are going to tour, you do need to take the climbers trail out of the parking lot. So this has changed just in the last couple of years, really. There's this little strip of snow that goes pretty far down. Some years it goes all the way to the parking lot, even into August and September. But that's where they park the cats. That's where ski patrol is coming down. So they don't want skiers going up on that strip of snow. So they ask that if you are going to tour, that you take the climbers trail up instead of skinning up that strip of snow. And then once you're up on the snowfield, as long as you stay out of the way, they're fine with you touring up the snowfield. So just be conscientious of that if you are going to tour. If you're going to take the lift, I actually just looked today because I couldn't remember how much the lift tickets were. And $75 is the current lift ticket price. So if you haven't heard, Timberline is actually opening tomorrow for operations for the summer. And I'm not sure what the restrictions are on that. I think you have to reserve tickets ahead of time, but check out their website if you're interested in that. So $75 is the current rate for a lift ticket, and a lot of times it's discounted by late season. So I think it's always been around $50 or $60.
Yeah, I think it's pretty consistently $60.
60, yeah. There was one year, the 14-15 snow year, they actually ended up closing in July because the snow was so bad. And that year, I think like lift tickets were a little bit cheaper, but usually I think it's about $60. And then since Mount Hood's a little far from Seattle to do in a day, it's definitely possible, but it's a pretty long drive. There are multiple options for camping near Trillium Lake and Government Camp. So that's always an option to make it a weekend trip. And if years line up, like last year, August 31st was a Saturday and September 1st was Sunday, I think, last year. So it was pretty awesome to go up there and get August turns on the last day of the month and then September turns on the first day of the month. Definitely made it pretty easy last year, which was awesome.
Yeah, that's been our pretty consistent plan for like the last 4 or 5 years, is we'll try to, even if we end up taking like a Thursday off and a Friday off or something, we'll go down and we'll ski August 31st and September 1st. And then that way we get 2 months, 1 trip.
Yeah.
And it's generally really fun because
Yeah.
riding chairlifts and drinking beers ain't bad.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, so this is just view from the parking lot. The climbers trail is there off to the left over our friend Colin's shoulder there. That's where that starts to climb up. And you know, it's definitely worth bringing your POW skis to ski all the corn.
Teresa just likes to always have the biggest skis on.
Yeah,
definitely did that day.
Like wide skis.
Yeah, and then this is the postage stamp that you get to ski on.
Yeah.
And then just right up here is where Teresa and I met, in case you want to go and check it out for yourself. It's a cool spot.
Yeah, so then coming up the Palmer Lift, if you've never been up there that late in the summer, it's a pretty surreal experience. It kind of feels like you're skiing on the moon as you're going up. There's absolutely nothing up there other than rock and snow. But it's definitely pretty fun, and the skiing's pretty great. Some years, if there's not a ton of snow, you actually will have to take your skis off and walk across dirt and then put them back on to get onto the lift. Not every year is like that, but there has been years where we've had to do that. So definitely don't take your nicest pair of skis if you're going to be skiing the Palmer Glacier. But yeah, skiing's super fun. They groom it every night. The lifts open at 7 a.m. Most of the ski racers earlier in the summer are out there really early hours while it's still super firm. Things usually, in our experience over the last few years, start to soften up around 9, and then skiing's really good from 9 to 11, so that's kind of what we usually shoot for. After 11, it can start to get a little bit schmooey, and then I think lifts close at 1.
Yeah.
They're open till 1.
Yeah, but it's kind of like ski racers from 7 to 11, and then skiers from 9 or 7 to 10, and then skiers from like 9 to 11 or noon. And then the late sleeper snowboarders come out after.
Yeah.
You don't really want to be there anymore.
Yeah. It's true.
Teresa here demonstrating the Sippel sister knee bend. So this is what we all really strive for in our own skiing. We never do it, but we can try.
And then this is probably my reason I love Mount Hood so much in August and September is it's just all of the friends. We usually try and get a big group to go down there every year and just make it into a fun weekend. Camping and skiing. There's really great mountain bike trails at Timberline. So I've actually done a weekend where I've skied, trail run, and mountain bike in the same weekend, and it's just super, super fun.
Yeah,
so,
and if you've got an inflatable paddleboard, you can bring that too.
Trillium Lake. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a great spot to go after you're done skiing, take a dip in the lake, bring your paddleboard. It usually is pretty busy on Labor Day weekend. It'd probably be a little bit better on off weekends, but definitely a great spot to cool off after skiing.
Yeah. So then we'll go through October really fast. I have had 1 good October and I've had like 8 bad Octobers. This is from my very first ever, I finished my year in October, so my very first ever 12 months of turns all year. I went up to Camp Muir with my buddy Johnny. It was like the last day we could go, and they didn't open the gate, and so then what we did is we just chased the freezing level up the hill all day. So we were basically we were completely soaked. We never met snow. We were always in rain. It was a complete whiteout. Even with all the Gore-Tex on, I have never been so wet and cold. So moral of the story is don't wait until October 31st. Try to go earlier. And then just actually a couple years ago, I went with some friends. My buddy Mitch Pittman took this photo. And this is actually on the Paradise Glacier on Mount Rainier. And we had just amazing corn skiing in October, which you don't ever expect, but and we had pretty low expectations for this day, but you don't know unless you go.
I've been pretty lucky to, again, with my work schedule, it makes it a little easier to get out on some days that other people might not have the opportunity. But I've had some pretty interesting October skis. This was actually Natchez Peak right off Chinook Pass. And so it was kind of a weird year where we got a bunch of snow at the beginning of October. I think this was October 8th. And the snow level was actually like right at the pass level. So they were able to keep the highway open, but there was still enough snow that you could ski. So it's definitely pretty low coverage. I think there was maybe 2 or 3 feet of snow. But it definitely made for some pretty fun, easy October turns, just being able to drive to Chinook Pass and hike up to Natchez Peak. Yeah, you can see pretty good amount of snow there. That's Natchez Peak. And then these pictures are just to show you how different every year can be. So this is October of last year, where there's snow all the way down to the Paradise parking lot. You still had to hike pretty far because there wasn't quite enough snow to ski down, but up on the near snowfield, it was just absolutely gorgeous skiing. Nice, smooth, buttery turns, skiing back down. And then in contrast to that, the year before, October of 2018, this is what it looked like. So I don't think we got any snow at all that year in October, or maybe just a little bit. But by the time I was able to get up to near, all the new snow had melted out. So this is what it looked like. And it was pretty dismal conditions for skiing. So not always great, but it's always fun to get out.
Yeah, fun fact, you would think that it's better skiing on this white stuff, but it never is. It's always really grabby, so stick to the brown PAL.
Yep.
So we got about 10 minutes left. We have gone a little bit over on our explanations. We wanted to save more time for Q&A, but we'll go ahead and hang out as long as people want. Our final recommendations are the following. So always bring approach shoes, even if you don't think you'll need them. It is no fun to hike extra in ski boots, even if it's only an extra mile. That is a really great way to not only like wear out your ski boots, but give yourself nasty blisters. So always bring approach shoes. Bring flip-flops with you and like summer clothes to change into after. Ladies, we are huge fans of just putting on a dress and you can strip off all your other stuff without anyone seeing anything. And trust me, you are not going to want to put your sweaty, wet feet back into anything else but flip-flops.
Yep.
And then, of course, bring your après drink of choice. This may seem obvious, but remember to pack your ski poles and your ski boots and your skis and your skins. Those are easier to forget than you would think. I know, I mean, Theresa and I once did an interglacier trip because she had forgotten her ski poles, so we each were kick turning with one ski pole. We had various levels of success with that. When you're skiing in the sunshine, you will get sunburn under your armpits, up your nose, on the roof of your mouth. So we don't demonstrate it very well in these photos, but for the most part, especially when we're skinning, we're always wearing sun shirts and hats. So just wear sunscreen and use sun protection. Skin cancer is no joke, so just don't mess around with that. I also really recommend coming up with a tracking system that works for you. It can be harder than you might think to keep track of like, what month am I on and where have I skied this year? So I actually put in here, I have an Excel spreadsheet. I've had it since 2012. It's how I know how many days Theresa and I have skied together. It's how we were able to put this presentation together relatively quickly. So I write, you know, what month is it? What month number is it? Season starts in November for me. So what date, how many days this season have I skied? What date was it? Was I backcountry skiing or alpine skiing? Where did I go? Who was I with? I generally write a couple notes about conditions for myself. And then I've recently started adding, since I use both Gaia and Strava, but how many miles did I go? What was the elevation? We like to try to set speed records every year when we're at Mount Hood. So what's the max speed? And then moving time, that'll tell you how long you are physically moving on the trip, obviously. And then the last one, which someone actually asked a question related to this, but you know, how do you find people to go with? Like when I first started skiing, I was introduced to it by a friend, but his group had such better fitness than I did in terms of the uphill. Like I could keep up on the downhill, but not the uphill. And so they didn't always invite me. Theresa and I met one of our really good friends, Nick Drake. We both met him through Instagram. So I just want to call out that like it might take some time to find your ski squad. And eventually you will, and it'll be amazing. But the best thing that you can do is be really upfront about your boundaries, be upfront about your experience and skill level. Never lie about that, because it puts everybody at risk. Because you can't make the same decisions that you would if you knew that, you know, I'm only a blue square skier, for example. So just give it a little bit of time. Definitely check out the Turns All Year forum and the Turns All Year website. Those are great places to start. People often will post that they're looking for partners. So respond to those, or feel free to post your own personals ad, and hopefully one day you'll find a ski relationship as great as Theresa and I's. So really quick, and we'll come back to questions. I know there's a couple folks popping off. Just again, a big thanks to Sky and the Mountaineers for hosting this. If you found that it's worthwhile and worth your time, it would really mean a lot to Theresa and I if you would make just even a little donation to the Mountaineers. So we'll go ahead to questions. We'd love it if you wanted to raise your hand so we can hear someone else talk. And then we can call on you. Feel free to turn your video back on at this point, or type a question into the chat. I really don't think we were that thorough. I'm sure. Questions. Well, there was a question earlier about gear, so I'll touch base on that. So someone asked about bindings. I really recommend tech bindings, something like this, 3-pin. You know, people have talked about safety. I ski these all the time. So, and Theresa and I are both expert level skiers. They release the way they should. They've come a long way. So it's a little bit of a misnomer that you can't really rail on tech bindings, because for the most part, they're pretty decent. These are the G3 Ions. I just got them and I really like them. I also have the Dynafit Volcanoes, I think are what those are, but yeah, that's what I recommend. So Jenny has a question. What about beginners? This seems a little daunting. That's a great question, Jenny. I wrote a blog a few years ago about how to get into Turns All Year, which like introduces, you know, kind of where your skill level needs to be, what you should look for in terms of gear. So I'll send that to Sky to send out after to everyone. Theresa, do you want to, so Sky asked, do you take a rope on Rainier even if you're not roping up?
It depends where I'm going. So Camp Muir is definitely a safe place to go, in the inner glacier. I don't bring a rope for those, or the flat glacier. But then definitely if I'm getting on to anything else, the Russell Glacier, yeah, anywhere other than those main routes that are mostly just snow fields at this point, I will be taking a rope. Yeah.
Yeah, and great answer from Julia. When you were beginning, your first ski tours were at resorts that were closed. Absolutely, that is like the best, safest place that you can go. Please note that right now, Snoqualmie, Stevens, and Crystal are all closed to uphill travel and patrolling, so please don't violate those rules. Last time I checked, White Pass, which is just south of Mount Rainier, is allowing and encouraging uphill travel, so that's a place to check out. And yes, we did rope up on the Emmons Glacier, for sure. And my worst month was that one I talked about, the very first October, where it was just super rainy. Theresa, do you want to talk about your worst month?
Oh gosh. Actually, I've been pretty lucky with my work schedule and being able to pick my days. I'd say the worst skiing was probably that October pick from Campmere, where the snow is just absolutely gross, really hard to ski. So that was actually probably my worst, but I've been pretty lucky.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I think Dimitar, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, asked if we ever create events for people to join on your adventures. Yes and no. We have hosted a Mount Hood event in the past that we just post on Facebook and friends can invite friends to.
Mm-hmm.
We're also, you know, like we showed some photos, we showed a lot of photos of big groups. That is very atypical. Generally, it's just me and Theresa, or Theresa and I and a few other folks. If we're doing something that is a little bit more dangerous or has a higher risk factor, we're definitely more careful about who we invite. Because anytime you invite someone to backcountry ski with you, it's sort of just like rock climbing. You're saying, I trust you with my life and I'm going to take care of your life. And so it really depends on the objectives, but like for Mount Hood, when we're just going down and we're going to be skiing inbounds and riding chairlifts, yeah, sure, it's a party. Everybody should come. So Charlie called out that just to mention that there are site-specific avalanche hazards. There's wet loose snow or wet slabs are an issue, definitely in the North Cascades. And yeah, Charlie, you're absolutely right on that one. That's why Theresa at the top talked about, you know, making sure to check recent trip reports, keeping up. One thing that my friend Imran recommended to me really early on is that he checks the forecast every day. And like anywhere that he might ski, so that he has a good idea by April what has happened to that snowpack that the entire year. And I think that that's something that both Theresa and I do, so that we know, hey, there's an unstable facet in there from February, and we need to be really careful in April or June. Typically what will happen in the Pacific Northwest is we'll get a long window of hot weather. It happens most of the time in April, sometimes in May, where all of the snow that's really going to avalanche will do what people call the shed. So like in a weekend, the snow will just get super heavy and it will all come down. Everything will avalanche. And from then on, stuff is relatively safe. But even into the summer months, depending on where you're going, depending on the aspect and depending on this, the angle of the slope, this stuff is always a danger. So always look out for it. Do you have recommendations for all around great touring skis? We posted the name of our skis earlier in the chat. Everybody's ski stuff is different. You know, do you want something heavier? Do you want something lighter? Do you want it burlier? We both ski something. I always recommend going a little bit shorter for touring skis than you would for inbounds. Just it makes it easier to do kick turns. Yeah. And then anything that's about 98 underfoot, give or take, centimeters is good for touring. Any other recommendations there, Theresa?
No, yeah, that's spot on.
Yeah, I mean, I just got these K2 mind benders and they are mind bending. I recommend those skis enough. So if you're looking for them, K2s are really freaking awesome. These are my, you know, these are also K2s and I've had them for 8 years and I still ski them all the time. So skis are definitely an investment, but I think when you're buying gear, boots are the very most important thing. Always buy them new, get them fitted by expert fitters. Don't try to buy deals online. Like it is just not worth the blisters and pain. Just go to Pro Ski in Seattle is great. One in North Bend is great. The guys at Evo are great. Go check those out. So invest in boots first, and then invest in bindings, and then invest in skis, because skis are easier to change out. Have we skied anywhere other than Tahoma and Y East in late summer? I have not. Theresa skied in Peru.
Yeah, that was in June though. I haven't. I don't know that there's many places to go that time of year that still have consistent snow. Yeah.
Yeah, there's questions about any skiing near Snoqualmie Pass. Snoqualmie Pass is National Forest Service land, So those trailhead parking lots are currently closed. I haven't been up there, so I'm not sure what it looks like. It is that it's melting fast. I've heard that as well. There's a question about mentorship programs. There will be a recording of the session, so that will go out later. Sky should send that out tomorrow. There's not a mentorship program as far as I am aware, but you know, just putting your name out there, letting people know you're interested. For everything Theresa and I did, I think she said this at the beginning, it all assumes that you are a competent black diamond skier. And we tell everybody, in order to get into the backcountry, you really should be really competent on skis, because you can find yourself in some spicy spots, and you need to be able to ski your way out of it or be comfortable. The biggest thing is, are you comfortable on a steep slope taking your skis off so that you can boot back up? Because that can be a really uncomfortable situation. So those are the sorts of things that we recommend first. Is if you're brand new to skiing, backcountry skiing is not for you. You need to, you know, you can buy a backcountry ski setup and ski it inbounds if you want to save money that way. But if you need to get a season's pass, I would recommend taking lessons and going inbounds to make sure you're confident there first. And in all likelihood, you'll meet some folks on the ski hill who you can ski with. I'm just scrolling through. Thanks everyone for all the really nice feedback. There's questions about, you know, if you're a snowboarder, you can definitely do this. You just get a split board. Yep, someone recommends taking Sky's recommending taking Airy 1. Absolutely, yeah. Everyone here should take the Airy 1 course, which is an avalanche course. Great. Well, we're now over time, so we're going to go ahead and cancel this out. You can find me on Instagram at ActiveLifeKC, or Theresa's on Instagram at TLSippel, that's SIPPEL. So we're happy to engage there and answer questions. You can also find my contact information at my website, which is occasionallyepic.com. Or as I said, I work for the Mountaineers, so my information is on the staff page. And we love backcountry skiing. We want as many people to do it as possible. So we would love to have all of you there. And cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks.